This is a conversation with Majora Carter. She's a real estate developer, author, and urban revitalization strategy consultant. She's also a MacArthur Fellow and a Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. She's also the founder of the Boogie Down Grind Cafe, the first commercial third space in the Bronx since the 80s. And she's also the founder of Bronxlandia. In this conversation, we discuss life in the Bronx in the 70s. We talk about the non-profit industrial complex and how it impacts low-status communities, the politics behind low-income affordable housing projects. We talk about Robert Moses, the psychology of power, the psychology of kindness, and then dealing with setbacks. This is No Time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, or rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to see this project continue, then do consider making a donation on Anchor, Instagram, Spotify. Pick your poison. And if not through financial support, then do consider sharing these episodes. All your shares, your likes and comments, they really go a long way. For other forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally. And now, it's No Time. You grew up in Hunts Point, South Bronx in the 70s. Let's assume that we have a time machine here today that can take us back to your childhood where it all started. Can you describe what daily life in Hunts Point was like? What are some memories that stand out to you? Both the happy memories and the difficult ones.
Oh boy. I mean, my life was so structured by my mom in particular. Like this was my day, literally. I would, wake up. I had already laid my clothes out to go to school for the night before. And, I'd wake up, get up, get washed up, have breakfast, run to school. I would come home for lunch, actually, which is right around the corner. My mom would, because she didn't want me eating school food. And, and then I'd go back to school and then come back home, do my homework, change into my play clothes, as I put them, which I'd also laid out the night before. And then after I did my work, go outside and play street games with my friends. It was double dutch, it was Skelsy, it was, stickball. And some of us made our own skateboards and roller skates. They were probably very, very dangerous. And we had a blast. I mean, we really, really did. And so those are my earliest memories. And now you would talk about it in the book, like every mother's had a very particular whistle, the way that they would whistle their kids back in for dinner. And then I'd, eat dinner, hang out with the family for a little while, put my clothes out, wash up, go to bed at 8:00. Then I was out like a light.
Sounds fun.
It was
Sounds
beautiful.
Like the dream.
I had a great life. And it wasn't until later on, that I started, when I was watching news with my dad, I realized that actually my neighborhood was burning around me. And didn't understand it, but the way that my neighborhood was talked about, it was as if it was like the poster child for urban blight. And I saw this on the national news. And it was a really troubling moment for me to realize, like, wait, they're talking about the same thing that, I go outside and play in. And because I didn't quite understand what was going on. And then it literally hit home. The year I turned 8, at the beginning of the summer, both buildings on the either end of my block burned down, which meant that the people who were there were all gone. And then at the end of the summer, my brother was killed as a result of the drug wars that happened around. And so between the arson that happened because of the financial disinvestment in the community, like redlining and, in particular, it was just, I got to see this and, in my little 8-year-old mind, I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew that what I really wanted was to get out of the neighborhood, despite the fact that I felt like there was still much love and, there was a lot of love and community within my own community, but I felt like I couldn't stay there.
Was there a specific moment where you had this revelation? Well, first, that your community, the way they talk about it in the news, was there do you have a core memory that you remember that it just hit you? And then another memory maybe where you've immediately made the decision that I have to get out of it?
Yeah, the actual time, because seeing it on the news, it still felt like it was a little bit away and it was more confusion, actually, rather than like like, wait a second, like what's going on? But, when my brother was killed, and I went back to school, after the summer was over, and realized that kids in my class, they were about to leave because their parents, were able to take them out and move to a whole other neighborhood. It was just kind of like, yeah, no, that's kind of when it started to happen. When I realized I'm in school, I'm really smart. I can get out of here, and I will, and it's just a matter of time. And I hadn't even turned 8 at that point, at that moment, but
Yeah.
I knew I had to get out.
Can you talk about the spirit of the people of Bronx back in the 70s? What was the prevailing sentiment, the zeitgeist? Were people hopeful? Were they dreamers? Or did you get a sense of there's a feeling of hopelessness or feeling of defeat in the air?
No, I mean, this is the fascinating part of it, right? Because the South Bronx and the Bronx in general, we lost 60% of the population from the late 60s almost into the 80s as a result of all the financial disinvestment, the fact that there was so much arson and just buildings falling into disrepair because of the old building stock that wasn't being invested in.
Mhm.
And then there was definitely, the influx of drugs. There was like lack of services being brought into the neighborhood as well. It was tough. So those things were real, and it did make people feel kind of horrible. However, those of us that were still there, like my dad, owned our house like outright. And the houses weren't worth much. So we couldn't sell it and buy something else, right? We were stuck right exactly where we were. And
Yeah.
again, I was a kid. I didn't fully understand that. But our house actually became this space for lots of people, to find a home, and not just, the 6 kids that my parents raised there. But, people, there was always people coming over to our house, whether it was for a day or a while, because it was a big place. And it was one of those things where I got to see, love in our community because people stuck together because we kind of had to. If we were there, we were there. And so like, honestly, we'll never forget like my brother's funeral. He was well loved, my family was well loved, and the number of people that showed up, it's just like giving nothing but love for our family and concern. And it may be in part because it could have happened to any of them, right? But everybody wanted us to know that they were there for us.
Mhm.
And I distinctly remember that in ways that just always remind me that despite of what the kind of things that we saw presented or heard about and even believed on our own, that our neighborhood was a terrible place sometimes, you also could not escape the fact that there was so much love.
Yeah, of course.
You just couldn't. And it was just like, duh, of course, like seriously. And those are the things I remember, which is why I think the first things that I think about,
Yeah.
is not, honestly, my brother's murder was when my brother was alive, and I was riding on his handlebars, around the neighborhood, or, jumping double dutch with my friends in the street. And, those are are being like watched over, by the adults in the neighborhood who just wanted to make sure that like we knew that as kids, they were being watched by older adults just to support them. And, things like that made me not hate my neighborhood.
The book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, he talks about a similar situation where when people are in difficult environments, often they end up gravitating towards the purest form of love and optimism, and they hold on to it, and that gives their life a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
And often it's the most purest form of hope and love that you can find in those places. So I can definitely resonate with that. You have often said that gentrification begins when people stop seeing value in their communities, not when you start seeing the doggy daycares or the cute cafes.
Absolutely.
Would you say that the gentrification of Bronx had begun back then in the 70s itself because people had long ago stopped seeing value in their community and they were only looking to get out of it and sell their family homes and settle somewhere else?
Yeah, or just abandon their family homes, not even sell them, because that would have been hard. I think that might have been a little too soon, but I could definitely see it on the come up. Mostly because, again, that's when it started that, we were being led to believe that there really wasn't any value, because there really wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you start thinking that way back then, really when it wasn't any value, it'll be much more difficult for you to think that there could be any going forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I know I felt, when I would we would get the New York Times and, there was the real estate section in the back, and I would show my dad, hey, look, there's this house somewhere in Long Island. And he would just humor me, but, not really. But I really thought we should just go there. I mean, look, there's a lawn, there's none of this. And there's not a burnt out building on the corner. And he was just well, maybe it's, but right now, no.
Yeah. We're still in this time machine.
Yeah. Okay. Time machine.
Time machine. Still in the 70s. But before we step out of it, if you could give one piece of advice to young Majora, what would it be and why?
That's a good one. I think honestly, the biggest piece would just be, it's okay. It's not just okay. It's really good to be as smart as you are. Because I really felt on some level that it wasn't cool to be smart. And I was really tall for my age. And, my mother dressed me funny. And, actually being a bookworm was not cool.
Yeah.
And, I really should have leaned into that. And I wish I had a lot more than I did.
Oh, that's great advice. Yeah. I wish someone had given, not that I was smart, but someone had just told me it's okay to be smart. I've tried.
Yeah, it'd have been cool,
Yeah.
But yeah, it took me a while to realize that.
We're getting out of the time machine, but before we leave, do you remember the taste of the bagels from Moshman's Delhi?
Oh my gosh. I do. And I actually, now that I think about it, now that you ask me, I think that it wasn't a bagel, my very first one. It was a bialy.
Bialy?
Yes. Because I remember thinking this is this is an interesting bagel. It's different from another bagel that I've had, because they are different. They're bialys are a little drier and flat. It's a different type of bread.
Do you remember your order? Your go-to order?
Yeah, it was what I thought was a bagel, but was in fact a bialy with butter. I didn't do cream cheese. I don't know why, but I just did the butter. Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Exactly.
That's how we say.
Cream cheese was not my jam back then. It just wasn't.
Is it now?
It's a little more so. I'm still a butter gal. I'm still definitely a butter kid. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a great meal. Just bialy and butter. Can't go wrong with that. Okay. Let's step out of the time machine. Let's start moving more into the present. Let's start talking about your work and your research. One of the central themes of your work has been that poverty has been ingrained as the culture of low status communities.
Yes.
And there are multiple forces that are at play that seek to perpetuate poverty and keep low status communities as low status.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with some definitions so we can set the foundation.
Okay.
What are low status communities and how are they different from poor or low income communities?
Sure. It's true. I actually started my book with the glossary because I wanted people to know that in particular.
Yep.
So we use low status, to describe communities that are usually often described in terms of being poor or low income, under-resourced, et cetera. We did that specifically because we wanted people to, understand and use the word status, because status implies that there's a higher status and there's a lower status.
Yeah.
And that inequality is literally at play. Something larger is at work when you use the word status. And truth be told, low status communities often are poor and under-resourced. They also have lower health outcomes, lower educational attainment, higher rates of folks involved in the justice world, higher rates of bad policing. And so it's all of those things. And they could be in not only inner cities, they could be in Native American reservations, they could be in white neighborhoods or white towns, basically, where there was a lot of industry, but that's long gone. They're all over the world. But they really are the places where brain drain happens, where essentially maybe not all, but pretty much most of the young people that are born and raised in those neighborhoods, if they're academically or artistically or athletically inclined, are led to believe that they need to measure success by how far they get away from them. And that is really how you know. And you could see it in terms of the type of developments that are there, whether they're urban, rural, or suburban areas. But it literally is the fact that inequality is assumed by people both inside and outside of the neighborhood.
Assumed by both people inside and outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very powerful idea, because when you decouple, or when you use the term low status and not poor or low income, you're stressing on the fact that it's not just the wealth inequality that's causes. There's a certain status that's been assigned to these communities, and there's so many forces at play that are keeping it that way. So it's and then, like you mentioned, it leads to an extremely low talent retention, the brain drain. The bright stars are encouraged to just leave the community, never come back.
And are expected to go. I mean, they're expected
and no
to
one
leave.
will blame them, right?
No, absolutely not. And, and it's always interesting when I do, talks around the country, even around the world, like there will almost always be a person who's just like, and I could see them, from the stage, I could literally, there's at least one, usually more, where their eyes just you could see them recede a little bit. Yeah. And they're just like, oh my God, that's me.
That's me. Yeah.
And then they go, I can't believe I did that. And I'm just like, look, of course you did. I mean, nobody blames you. Nobody. I mean, I did it too. Literally, I did it too. But but this is a way that we can share this information about how it's being done to us, and then realize, wait, why did I feel that way? Why are certain communities treated this way? And I was like, oh, because again, inequality is something that is literally being pressed upon certain folks, that are considered at that status. And it's just we do that. Yeah, we do that. And we could undo it too. That's what is so super powerful to me, that we can change this.
Very powerful. And it's the realigning of, there's multiple definitions of the success story, and the version of your success story that you have to move out and make it somewhere else.
Yep.
That's not the only one.
Right. And not to say that, look, if you want to go. That's fine. God bless you.
Yeah.
All sorts of wonderful things, and wish you the best. But I do think that if some more of us actually turned around and said, okay, we're going to be here.
Yeah. Very powerful definition. Let's get through another definition.
Yes.
What is the non-profit industrial complex? What is it made of? Why does it exist? And who are the main players?
Okay.
I'm opening up a can of worms.
So it's like any industrial complex, it literally, the military in particular, it exists to perpetuate itself. Mm-hmm. Military industrial complex doesn't exist to create peace. It has to have war in order to exist, right? Yeah. And the same thing with the nonprofit industrial complex, which includes, it includes philanthropy, the folks that are actually putting their money in, whether it's private foundations, corporate foundations, whatever. It includes the actual actors, the activists who are doing the work, the organizations that accept that those funds to make it happen. And it also, I would actually argue that it includes, our government, who actually looks to that, because again, the nonprofit industry actually has its own there's a part of the government structure that allows for it to exist, to do the kind of work that the government says maybe should be done on more of a local level. Literally, there's a tax designation for it. So they play a role in it as well, as far as I'm concerned. And, and even in the private sector plays a role too, because it becomes this really interesting way to get the kind of private sector work done that, that just happens that way, right? So especially when it comes down to development. So, but the main players are both philanthropy as well as the nonprofit community or organizations that actually do that work.
Right.
A non-governmental association they're called sometimes. And so yeah, it exists to perpetuate itself, because if you really stopped, just look at the numbers, because in most other parts of the world, if you look at the numbers around anything and the data, and you look at the data and see the results of the way money is being spent, just in the States alone, if you look at the billions and billions of dollars that's spent on, the social ills of our country, you realize that none of the actual outcomes have gotten much better.
Yeah.
And because we often do it the same exact way. And, we haven't really changed, in any real way, how philanthropic funds are spent in communities, it often is it's obviously a very top-down approach that, is more where that assumes, I think, that poverty is a cultural attribute. We need to make life a little easier for the people that are in poverty, not necessarily change it, but just like manage the poverty so that, it's their lives are a little better. Because if it was really about how do we literally change the way that our communities are developed, so that the health outcomes are different, so that the educational attainment is different, we wouldn't be doing the same exact things because we have lackluster results at pretty much every turn. And so that's the complex. They still exist, and so do the problems.
They definitely exist. It's these institutions, these organizations, entities that the public objective is to solve the problem, but they end up perpetuating it.
Yes.
And that always creates this infinite loop.
Totally.
Napoleon had once said that never ascribe to malice what can be adequately explained by incompetence. Out of all these entities in the nonprofit industrial complex, how many of them do you think are intentionally manipulative, deceitful? And how many of them do you think have their hearts in the right place, but maybe they're just misguided in their approach?
I would say the larger, I'm really hoping that most of them are just not willfully looking at the outcomes and going, I'm contributing to this by my work. And I'm going to continue to do that. I honestly think that there's this whole crazy idea that if we just try a little bit harder at this, it's going to be different. Just like, no, try something different.
Yeah.
How about that? And I definitely think about, frankly, just the tools of capitalism. The fact that, it's a tool. It's like, I think Desmond Tutu, talked about that famous quote of his, like, a knife, it's a tool. You can cut a piece of bread and share it with a friend, or you could like plunge it into a person. Same knife, different intentions. And I feel that if you look at capitalism, the same kind of tools that literally created American slavery were the same tools that created Black Wall Streets, which were these thriving, areas and cities that happened right after slavery, and that Black people, by hook or by crook, figured out ways to create these beautiful, economic ecosystems, and just culturally and every other way that really fed their spirit, their wealth generation opportunities, just their culture, and they were there, and it's just like, so. What was different about them? Because right now, and then for the one in Tulsa, at least it was bombed from the air when white people got like really stupid about, thinking that Black people shouldn't have really nice things. But I do really think that we should be thinking about how do we apply the same tools that created wealth for, a certain segment of our population, and we didn't apply those same tools to others. And I think that's a question that is not asked very often, because there's always a program, to help poor people through the nonprofit industrial complex, but it's almost never to really do the thing that will impact wealth generation opportunities, because we know that economically disempowered people are really easy to push around. So if we're not going, how do we create access to opportunity in that way, then we are asking the wrong question. You cannot look at a person and just think, oh, we're just going to make it easier for them to live through their like horrible life. No, how about we like get them out of that life, give them opportunity so that they can have the kind of life that anybody would consider worth living. And yeah, in Boston, I understand that the average net worth of Black people is like $8, as opposed to like 100 or so thousand for white families nearby. If that isn't enough for people to go, maybe we should rethink like how we're doing things. I don't know what is. But apparently it's not enough, because instead I keep hearing more and more and more and more and more about what people need are just only more affordable housing for very poor people. There's no aspiration in terms of their ability to be something other than poverty stricken. But again, if you just look at low status communities as that's all they're ever going to be, that's how you treat them. And we're not being self-reflective as a society and going, what have we done that's literally exacerbated everything that we say we're trying to stop?
It's easier to hope, or I guess it's better to hope that these entities are just ignorant, just misguided, and then if they're more self-reflective, things will change. But what if they're intentionally deceitful, manipulative? Does that make your
I think some
your
are.
fight so much harder?
I'm sure some of them are completely understanding of what they do. No doubt.
How do you tackle that?
Have other people who don't feel that way do other things. That's because the only way you're going to, because this is a game of show and tell. It really is. And so that's why even when I was running a nonprofit, we did project based and economic and environmental developments. We were totally solutions based. It was like, look, at the end of the day, like people need to see something different. They literally need to, because if it was, it wasn't there before, but oh my God, there's something there. Like, wait, just to give them something else to look at and to think about and to consider, and as like a change. And it was never easy to do, but also even just people, you realize that there's like so much trauma that people experience, and that there's a part of us that we don't even believe that a change could happen. Like, I can't even tell you how many times when we first started the park on our waterfront that I spearheaded, and it was a dump. We've been using it as a dump for 30 years. It was a street end that dead ended at the Bronx River and then had been dumped on for 30 years. Like for all my life, like I did not know that you could get to the river from anywhere in my neighborhood, because there was like dumps along it and, another industry, et cetera. And so when I finally did see it and then had a chance to really work to create what is now a national award-winning park, it was so crazy, to be there as people would walk in and then be like, who's this for?
Yeah.
What do you mean, who's it for? Like, literally, did you just walk here from your apartment 2 blocks away? And it was just like, but it's really nice. Like, nice things don't happen here. And just in that, stuff like that literally like cut me to my core. Because when you realize that people just automatically assume that their neighborhood is never going to be anything that's going to speak to them, that's going to make them feel good about it. And that when something nice does show up, they go, can't possibly be of ours. That's trauma. And we've totally exacerbated that through how we've been developing our communities, low status communities in particular, for all these years. And we can be better.
To be so deeply entrenched in that environment that when you get something so good that you can't even fathom that this is for us.
Yes.
That nice things are also possible. That's such a complicated web that's been built around. You brought up low income affordable housing. I'm going to keep opening this can of worms for you.
Keep opening it. I love talking about it.
So why is it that a majority of low income affordable housing proposals go through? What is the structure in place? What are these players that benefit from that? And why are these projects preferred over mixed income housing? Well,
so an interesting story. I don't know how I got invited, but I got invited. This was under the de Blasio administration. We had tried quite valiantly to make and I talk about it in my book as well, a mixed income housing, mixed use commercial development at this former juvenile detention facility in my neighborhood. And, I'd been working at it for years, with probably the most diverse team New York City had ever seen, more women, more people of color led firms, and, 2 white male firms led firms as well, because we were really diverse and we value diversity. There you go. But it was so fascinating because I got invited to this thing and just like talked about, how, so much the continuation of affordable housing, of very highly subsidized affordable housing federally subsidized affordable housing, which developers do because there's a nice big developer fee associated with it. And that's why they do it. It's not like this altruistic thing. And it's very much a well-oiled machine that's done by, like a certain segment, of the industry, and they keep doing it. And it's not a big group. It really isn't. And they keep doing it, and they keep doing it in the same exact places where poverty is concentrated, even though we know that the concentration of poverty continues to exacerbate poor health outcomes, educational attainment, you name it, all of those things. And so I asked the mayor, why does his administration keep doing that? and he was just like, oh, and to his credit, he actually acknowledged that was the case. And I was just like, good. And then on the side, he said to me, so, listen, I've got people who, interesting enough, two different segments of the population who never agree on anything, but this time they do. And you've got, housing activists who want nothing but affordable housing to be built. And then there's also the real estate developers who know exactly how to build it and want to build it because it's so profitable. And, and he said, well, you're the I need to hear more from people like you, who are actually talking about mixed income. And I was like, well, yeah, actually, your administration just, picked another proposal over ours that actually provided home ownership, and supportive housing and all these things that you say we should have had in this proposal. But yeah, your administration did that. And he was just like, I don't know what he knew, but it was just really kind of pathetic. And it was just a really, well, this is weird because they don't have, I like these little columns, but I don't see where they fit. But anyway, I'll find it. And so it really is about the continued, the subsidies are used because, again, not that it's super easy, but the folks that know how to do it will do it and use it because it's a pretty profitable game for them. So they do it, and it doesn't matter where they get concentrated. Like, they're not putting their families in these places. So what do they care? Ultimately, and again, if the activists on the ground, are responding, to a need for housing, I'm not saying that they're not, but I also think that the continuation of literally concentrating poverty, we know how it ends. Well, first of all, it doesn't end. It exacerbates the continued, uptick in all of the social issues that we say we want to get rid of. And we know that economically diverse communities where folks are literally being the example for others in their neighborhood to show what's possible, so that you don't think that the only thing you can be, are the kind of things that you either on welfare or something like that, where it's just sort of like, no, you need to be able to see, if you don't see it, you won't believe it. If you don't get a chance to see folks actually behaving, and being, the kind of aspirational things that sometimes you dream of being, it'll be harder for people to see that. And I think there's even studies out there that show that if people don't have an opportunity to see what's possible, they just don't even, it doesn't even register. Which, we're not that creative. And as humans, actually, we definitely are really creative. But again, it's like the idea of possibility has to be something so that we can sort of just have a little bit of inkling, to see things change. That's what it is.
Yeah. Such a complicated, intricate web that's been created around all these entities. So we spoke about low income affordable housing. You have similar structures in place for all other components of the nonprofit industrial complex. You have listed in your book as well: housing shelters, pharmacies, junk food chains, community centers, liquor stores. And some of these, of course, they're necessary for the low income households in the community, but you have said that these are not enough to make people stay behind because they don't target the mixed income households. And you have said that what they actually want is stuff like cool cafes, restaurants, parks, farmers markets, event venues, lifestyle infrastructure that is also commonly known as third places. So,
yes.
Follow-up question from this: what role do these third places play in civic engagement and building up a community? What are some of the important benefits they offer that are not spoken about enough?
Yeah. So I really do believe that community is not just a place, it's an activity, but you need places where you can gather with other people in order to do community. And in so many low status neighborhoods, what you often find are folks that literally might live in the neighborhood and then they leave it, whether for work or whatever. And there's no place for them to hang out. Like for example, in my neighborhood, like the biggest places, like in terms of community square footage, it's the inside of health clinic waiting rooms. And there's a couple of community centers, but they're mostly for little kids. So you've got like all the strivers, young adults or older or even younger, who are just like, there's a lot more in this world out here. And wait, I could just take the subway, or I can just, whatever, I can be out like really quickly.
Yeah.
They're not going to stay. I mean, it's so interesting because even now with our cafe, we've been there for 5 years and we're still being discovered by people in our neighborhood. Why? Because, they're so used to nothing being there that they literally just will walk literally directly in front of our spot and not even look. It's like they have blinders on because they're so used to not seeing anything. And it's hilarious when we have people come in and they're just like, oh my gosh, welcome to the neighborhood. And we're like, we've been here for 5 years. And they're like, you're joking. You're joking. Like, I just had no idea, because it's like, I walk down this way all the time. And it's like, and we have this conversation. It's like, but you probably didn't look around. Yeah. Because it's like, yeah, never. Because again, that is the same kind of thing. It's like they were like a certain type of folks is just not even expecting anything good to happen in the neighborhood. So they don't even bother to look for it. And then there's the other ones who are just like, if I see it, it can't possibly be for me. Like unfortunately, there's more folks who are just like, oh my gosh, it's here. Like there's something good here, because I think there is a yearning for folks to feel good about where they are. I think that's human, to want to have the environment around you speak to you, in loving ways. And if it doesn't, it's like water, like seeking a way out. That's what will happen. So if we can create that space or those spaces in our own communities that make people feel like, oh, wait, this is a place to be, we can do that. That's what we try to do.
You are reclaiming. So we started this interview talking about your childhood memories, about Bronx in the 70s. You are reclaiming multiple elements from your childhood. The crack den that you used to walk past in the corner every single day is today the Boogie Down Grind Cafe. Mm-hmm. The dump that you mentioned earlier next to the Bronx River is now the Hunts Point Riverside Park. The Dormo-style railway station that was designed by Cass Gilbert, the same design as the Woolworth Building and the US Supreme Court. The same railway station where your father, Pullman Porter, came through with a bag of $15,000 that he had won playing the ponies.
You read my book.
I made someone else read it. I didn't. So that same railway station now is owned by you, and now it's an event venue. Mm-hmm. You have done this with the help of a great team, of course, but they've largely been driven by your vision.
Yes.
How does it make you feel when you reclaim these elements from your childhood? Is it a powerful feeling? Does it make you feel like a creator, like an artist? Or are those feelings that you don't strive for?
No, I absolutely do consider myself an artist. Like, in fact, my initial work, when I moved back into the neighborhood, I was working as my whole idea was to be a filmmaker. And so that, and I was just like, biding my time to hopefully get out of the neighborhood soon. But yeah, so, I mean, and everything that I've done has been kind of a creative approach to making our neighborhood a better place to be, period. So I do feel very much like that. So that's interesting that you kind of, peep that, because it's all true. But I love the idea that, it's just sort of like, I do consider my neighborhood my research and development lab. Yeah. But it's also a canvas, because you can draw stuff on it, but and paint things on it, but the whole point is that whether it's you're looking at it from a scientific perspective or a more creative one, which I think science is actually very creative, has to be the spirit of inquiry that goes into it and all that stuff. The whole purpose is to give folks something else to consider. That's all. Like, literally, it's about sort of challenging the assumptions that they've had of what they were looking at before. Literally change, like the rail station, which we call it now Bronxlandia. It's people knew the spot because it stood at the gateway of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you could not go in or out of the neighborhood without looking at this building, which was unique in its own way. I mean, Cass Gilbert was really incredible, and he did some really funky things with this building, with the dormers and this beautiful, this thing called a hipped roof, which I learned from like Higgins and Quaid-Sparth, which is this historic preservation, fabulous firm. We have a hipped slate roof, which I just love saying. Just cracks me up. But anyway, with these beautiful dormers, just like bizarre. So you could not see this building. And so for folks in the neighborhood to, once we opened up all the gates and did all the interior demolition and showcase this beautiful terracotta tile, which is still under a lot of layers of like literally 80 years of crud. But you can still see that it's incredible. This 17-foot high vaulted ceiling with these like sick acoustics. Oh my gosh, the performances that happen there are just like mind-blowingly beautiful. And so, but to see people when they walk in and they're just like, wait, I know this place, and this isn't what it was. I mean, it used to be like it was split into many like little storefronts, and there was a strip club, and there was a beauty salon and a pizza shop, and now it's just this absolutely palatial thing that can be filled with things that they would love to see and come to see. And it's just, again, it's about changing people's perspective or giving them a reason to change perspectives. Because again, if you're looking at only the same things over and over and over and over and over again, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Just even for the most creative people to think of it differently. And that's why, I think one of my biggest joys and also my gift is being able to look at something and go, what else could it be? And fortunately, like I feel like my work has been informed by listening to folks, in low status communities, including my own neighborhood, for what they dream about. Yeah.
I love it. I'm all for romanticizing this idea of you being a creator, holding this paintbrush and using it as a canvas, so to speak, because once you start putting in that thought, that vision that building a community, giving back to community can be a creative pursuit and people can channel that creatively, that romanticism will seep in and more people will be attracted to doing it. So
it is very romantic. Yeah. I don't think I never would have called it like, but it is.
It is. And let's do it so that you get more creatives involved where they can just look at a project and say, oh, what can we do with this and how can we give back to the community? There's a lot of creativity involved in that as well.
Absolutely.
Martin Luther King, in a letter from Birmingham jail, he had once said that, I hope, sirs, that you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience.
Yes.
How have you handled impatience with your work when you face setbacks, roadblocks, when you face an obstacle that pushes you back by a year or a couple of years? Does it still frustrate you, or have you learned to deal with it now?
Oh, of course it frustrates me. How could it not? But on the same token, I do feel like it just, patience is also something that you can work to create. And it gives you, once you're moving in a different direction, you can feel it. And that makes me very, very happy. Being able to see that in different ways. So that's what I work on, thinking about how do you, essentially focus on, the fact that that's still part of the creative process. Like maybe you don't understand, why, your paints turned overnight and they're not the same consistency that you thought they were going to be. And once you get up in the morning based on some kind of like atmospheric event. So I think of things like that, or, for me, it's more about like, how do you deal with like lack of access to capital and figure out like, how do you make it so that you can still do some great stuff. And you just have to get a little more creative. And it's not like it doesn't bother me. It really does. But I feel this is where I think my faith definitely comes in, because, as a person of faith, like I really do look at this as just me. The work that I do is like loving my neighbor. And in a way that, I know is going to happen. So I have it. So I'm just like, it's just like, it might not happen the way I want it to happen right now, but ultimately it's going to have the kind of impact that folks are going to be talking about for years to come, and will benefit from in ways that, I don't think they even understood how they were going to benefit. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, it can get really frustrating, but I take your point that if you have an anchor, or let's say if you have a target in your vision that really helps you cope with that frustration, then work towards a goal that you maybe can achieve and take it step by step. Yeah,
I do.
I get it. Okay. While we're talking about frustration, while you are reclaiming, repainting your community, so to speak, not everyone feels that way. You have a thriving Majora Carter fan club, which is a euphemism you have for your critics and your detractors. When you opened up the Boogie Down Grand Cafe, there was a protest and they held up a banner saying Majora Carter sells out the Bronx, one coffee at a time. They have vandalized your smiley faces and they have used phrases like Trojan horse business, Columbus syndrome, sellout, self-gentrification. They've highlighted all those concepts.
Great. Yeah.
Why do you think, great. Why do you think you have this fan club? Do you think they are misguided? They are so deeply entrenched in the nonprofit industrial complex that they're not able to see the way that you're proposing? Or do you think it's the tall poppy syndrome, the crabs in a barrel mentality that we see some of the community trying to do something, bring them down? Or do you think that maybe their heart is in the right place as well and there might be some merit to the argument?
I'm sure there probably is some merit to their argument, but I wouldn't necessarily know since we've not ever had a conversation about it and they don't feel the need to ever speak to me. Because, we've certainly been open to having conversations with them or anybody, who feels the need to talk. But yeah, it's not like we don't want to. I really would. But every moment that I've had has been it's just attacking. And the ones where I did at one point, and I didn't put it in the book this time, unfortunately, but I did get a chance where someone was interrupted me. I was at a panel somewhere else in the city and somebody came in and started heckling. And so, and the organizers just wanted to kick them out. And I was like, no, I'd like to hear what they have to say. And I also want to ask them some questions. Since, you have an audience. And so I was just like, how about, so what should I have done?
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you think I should do? And there's a little pause. And all they could say was not open a coffee shop. And, well, it's already there, number one. And you can't ask, what should I do? And then answer a question like that in the negative. If you do have a vision, let's understand it. Help me understand what it is. And maybe we can work with that. But just being utterly negating of everything is just how do you build with not doing anything? So I didn't know what to do with that. Literally, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that? That was the closest I've ever come to a conversation, which obviously wasn't a conversation, but because that's all I got. But I really do feel like there is definitely a misunderstanding. And I really also think that, white supremacy, has had such an impact, on us, for obviously hundreds and hundreds of years at this point, where we were, people of color in general were just, pitted against each other. I mean, new immigrants were pitted against, ones that were already here, just as a way, because it only just to support the ones who were already in power. Right. And so you can't possibly, so some would be rewarded, for you doing the things that whether it's the master or the person in power said that they should do. And that was that. And I think we still deal with some of the residue of that right now. So I'm not surprised at all that there is a sense of scarcity within our society. And I think especially in low status neighborhoods where it's just there's so little to go around. And I was like, there's not a little to go around. Seriously, we have to stop that and thinking if we can move in a spirit of abundance, we could know that I'm not saying we should never have affordable housing in our community. No, I didn't say that. I think we should have a range of affordability because not everybody in our neighborhood, can, first of all, if we're only building for the poorest of poor people in our neighborhood, what happens to the families whose parents actually did well for their kids and they did go away to college or they do have great jobs and actually want to live close to their parents, but they can't because nobody's building housing for them. And that in and of itself, I mean, if these folks grow up and have kids, grandma and grandpa could actually be really involved in the children's life. can't do that like on that close a level if families can't afford to live together.
Yeah.
Like in a very real sense, because there's not housing for all ranges of incomes to be in the same place. So I'm not saying don't do anything, but I am saying is just like, let's broaden our discussions of who does development in our neighborhood and also what kind of development happens. Because if the same types of folks are doing the same types of development over and over again, and they're almost always exclusively people not from our communities and then not looking out for our own interests, are we really going to get what we want? The kind of communities that make us feel like our neighborhoods are worth living in? No, we're just not. Like history has shown us that. So pay attention to that.
Call to attention to the Majora Carter fan club. Just have a conversation. Yeah, let's start.
I would totally.
Yeah, just reach out to Majora and have a conversation.
We tell him.
Yeah.
And even that day, like it was just like I went out and it was like, hi. Seriously, like there's food in here. You want to see what we're actually doing? Which was, and that was the utterly ironic part. The day we were protested, we were hosting a meeting with these two groups that we had actually worked with on our own, and they were lenders. And they were offering low interest loans and 0% interest loans to local homeowners and to small business owners in the neighborhood. And it was just like, this was a resource that anybody could have used. And they instead in their paperwork, because we knew how many folks were actually losing their homes to predatory speculators or who needed access to capital for small businesses, and they wanted to start. And, but in their literature, they were saying things like, Majora Carter's is stealing, homes from old people, or I'm, like hiring kids to work in a tech company for free for my friends in tech companies downtown. It was just like, oh my God. And then you realize that they don't understand and don't want, and clearly didn't want to know.
What's harder, that people outside the community don't believe in a community and don't think it'll succeed, or that people within the community don't believe it'll succeed?
Oh, that's definitely the saddest part, is when people in our own neighborhood don't believe. I expect, folks from outside the neighborhood not to. And I'm just like, I'm prepared to deal with that. I'm prepared to deal with both of them. But it saddens me more, when I have folks who are just like, this is never going to be any change. And it's just sort of like, what are we, chopped liver? Like, seriously, like, why would you say or even believe that, when clearly, like, you're from here too, yet you feel like you can only do something outside of it. Who's making you feel that way? Seriously, like, who's making you feel that way? Like, let's unpack that. And then let's have that discussion again. But it's been, but I understand. I do get it.
Let's talk about Robert Moses.
Okay.
What was the impact that he had on Bronx with the Cross Bronx Expressway project, and what was the impact he had on New York City in general?
Oh gosh, the impact that Robert Moses had on the Bronx, you can literally see it with the spaghetti network of highways that were built. It was Cross Bronx, it was the Deegan, on the other end, the Sheridan Expressway, which is really wonderful for me right now. Although I feel like his vision of New York State, which was totally car centric, totally like, it was, if you went back in time, like his version would have been like, like 400 years ago would have been support the planter class, the folks that owned slaves, because they were like the power brokers, and that's what was important.
Yeah.
And so his vision, when you look at the Bronx in particular, was that it was like he was making it so to make it easier for wealthier people in points north, Westchester, to get down into Manhattan and vice versa. And it didn't matter, if, the more working class people in the Bronx, just were literally removed overnight, literally. And they were people of all colors. That's the other crazy thing. It wasn't just like poor Black and Latino people. It was just like, there was a bunch of white neighborhoods that just were just destroyed. But to him, they didn't mean anything, because they just were like, working class, white people, which meant that they were spit. They were lower status. Mm-hmm. So that is also really just fascinating to me. But that, the development of all that was really crazy, in terms of how New York City is now literally structured, from where the beaches are. Like, again, getting to the beaches was the way, and him lowering, some of the bridges so that buses couldn't get through. So people who needed public transit weren't able to go to the beach.
Yep.
You could not, the man is just like gross in every single way. And I feel like I'm, God forgive me, but, like my, the Hunts Point Riverside Park that I spearheaded was actually supposed to be another bridge, was supposed to be the terminus of another bridge that was going to be a part of the New York Thruway system that never got done.
Yeah.
So I feel like its transformation from the access way to a bridge, which never got built and is now a community park, is kind of awesome. The Sheridan Expressway, which never also, because that was done at the very tail end of his reign of terror.
Yeah.
Never got finished. So it literally was like this truncated little piece of an interstate that literally did the same, that traveled the same exact way as a regular street, that separated us from the river and also from our own community. And that's going away right now, thankfully. And that will actually be right next to my rail station, which is so hilarious that it's literally coming down as we speak. And it's that on-ramp to this ridiculous highway that never should have been built in the first place is going to be a public plaza outside of my rail station. So I'm kind of like, sorry, Bob.
Sorry, Bob.
Not really. Sorry, not sorry.
The book, The Power Broker, it's a masterpiece. It's a comprehensive dissection of his evolution from an idealist reformer to this ruthless emperor whose power went unchecked. The Cross Ponds Expressway, the Battery Park, he had a project there. He was about to destroy Battery Park. Yep. He had the Verrazano Bridge.
Yep.
And he destroyed multiple neighborhoods in Brooklyn as well because of it. I found that book interesting because when it was dissecting that evolution, in fact, I'm going to change it into a question. I had thrown a tough question your way earlier where I asked you to step into the shoes of your fan club. I'm now going to ask you to step in the shoes of Robert Moses.
Yeah.
If you had to steelman Robert Moses and his projects, are you able to pick out any positives from the work he had done? And the reason I asked this question is I had the opportunity to speak with someone who was on Mayor Bloomberg's administration, and they had voiced similar thoughts about Robert Moses. Not a fan of them, but they had pointed out that at least they were able to pick out the way he had navigated the bureaucratic process initially in his career.
Right.
And they were able to mimic that to actually get some work done.
Right.
So I just want to check with you, are there any positives that you can take from his work that you can apply in community building?
Look, you cannot say that he wasn't a person of vision. He had a vision and he was just like, I'm going to take it, which is, and on a certain level, you have to respect that.
Yeah.
As disgusting as it was, as, like his racism, his classism, all of that was very, very real. But he understood there's something that needs to get done. I'm going to figure out how to get it done.
Yeah.
And I really actually appreciate that. That is the one thing but the way, it was more about how and what he did that really made me go, gross. But I feel like we don't have an awful lot of folks who are just like, we're gonna, except for the not nice people who just will stop at no end. And I'm just like, why can't, people of good, moral fiber actually, understand that we can be very steadfast ourselves. But I feel like we just don't do it.
Can we explore that? It's
sure.
Very interesting. And I agree with you. Often they have a very strong vision and then they have the work ethic, the drive to match it. The unfortunate situation, this was the vision wasn't great.
Yeah.
But he had the work ethic and in a way he was successful in executing his vision. It's just that the vision didn't
the vision was gross.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
I find that very interesting because there's a phrase that says power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
And even in the book, they detail how he started off very idealistic. He wanted to do good. He started working on parks. And then as he climbed up the position of power, as he became a power broker, it's just...
and it was so... Exactly. And he climbed up and it was almost as if folks were just amazed and didn't check him. And it was just I've there's a part of me that feels really good about I feel like my fan club is very helpful because the things they say about me, first of all, I know they're not true, But it's just sort of like, when I look at them, I'm like, but that's not me. And I also have like plenty of folks around me who check me all the time. And I check with them to make sure that it's like, no, these are the things that I know will actually help make a community better. Does it mean that I'm going to be perfect and will never make a mistake? No, but I know I got people around me who will tell me that. And I'm not sure, because of the way that he grew so quickly, that there were people who were willing to who felt like politically they could do it themselves. And that's why it was just like, why, like people like Jane Jacobs, or actually my friend Roberta Gratz, who worked on the Lower East Side as well, and did some work that, and was a protege of Jane Jacobs, because unfortunately her family lost like quite a bit, but she was like, I want to make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else. So people, who felt like they really didn't have anything to lose were just like, and I don't feel like I have much to lose. I really don't, to be, because it is lonely. It is lonely, I think, to keep talking about things that are beyond the status quo and well outside of it. Like, here I am, I'm this Black chick, from a low status community, actually saying, you know what? Yeah, the way that all of you big boys, and they're mostly boys and they're all white, are doing this is actually hurting our communities. It hurts our entire society. And I'm not afraid to tell you that. And I think I can do it better.
Yeah.
Period. And I think many of us should have the opportunity to do it better. Sometimes I do scare myself when I think about stuff like that. I'm not going to lie, because it's just like I could be squashed, and I have been squashed, but I'm still here.
Still here. And we are happy you're here. It's so interesting when people climb up power and they end up creating those echo chambers, and as a result, completely lose their framework for morality from where they started.
Totally.
What a book. And I remember having so many of these thoughts when I was reading it. One final big question for you. We'll start moving to the smaller questions then. I want to get your take on kindness. You have advocated for a philosophy of self-gentrification, using capitalism to get residents in the community to gather private equity, and as a result, build some leverage so that they can keep giving back to the community.
Yes.
How do you feel about kindness? Do you think people have it in them to purely operate out of kindness of their hearts without expecting anything in return, and they can work tirelessly for their entire life? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what is the purest form of altruism and philanthropy versus, do you think if you have to be really practical, then people need to have some incentive, whether it's money, fame, attention, and it's a matter of channeling that incentive into something good?
Yeah. First of all, that was the nicest, the most interesting way I've ever heard private equity being framed before. It's not the same as like private equity, but yes, private equity and community, and it is private and it is equity. So anyway, but I was like, oh, that's lovely. I'm glad it's being recorded so I can like piece that apart, because I'm going to quote you. But look, it is about kindness. Like, people want to feel, I think there's nothing more than people want than to feel loved and appreciated. And I think the reason why so many of us don't behave that way is because we don't believe that it's ever coming to us.
Yeah.
So when we start playing this game of, you know what, how can we be kind to each other and show that, then suddenly it becomes something that people want, and we show that we can pass it along and pay it forward, and that in and of itself is the kind of thing that makes me happy going forward. So I don't know. I feel like, little things like, how do you create the spaces that make people feel as though they can afford to be gracious and generous and kind to each other? You can't do that if you feel like you're all like, if there's so much scarcity that if you're not like hoarding stuff for yourself, you're never going to be in a space where you could feel like, oh, open it up. But to show that level of vulnerability, and literally, like the way dogs do when they show submission. We're just like, okay, I'm of no threat to you. And it's not, I want to be beyond of no threat, but I want to feel like I can afford to give you something that you didn't know was even possible in this community. Like at our cafe, we, expect our people who work behind the counter, just like, no, like sometimes this will be the only place people will come into when someone greets them with a smile. Like, and if you can't do that, and I did have one guy who just said, Majora doesn't pay me to smile. It's like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. And he didn't last long. And it was like, see ya. But anyway, but no, that's the whole point. Like, we want to create those spaces so that people know, oh, wait, I just got it. Maybe I can give it out. Mm-hmm. And that is something that ultimately people need to feel. And then they also need opportunities so that they feel as though they've got something to look forward to. And that's why we focus so much on the economics of a community. Yeah. Because again, I do really, and again, it's not just my personal feelings, it is history. Economically disempowered people are easy to push around. And they're also the ones who are just both, not just economically challenged, but medically, health-wise, educationally, they're challenged in all of those ways. And because much of it stems from that they don't have the resources to support themselves in any other way. Yeah. So if we know that's the case, then let's do something different about it. And that's why I do what I do, period.
Mm-hmm. And building the economics around the foundation of kindness, I think it's a very powerful idea.
Yeah. We can all afford it.
We can all afford it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Before we move into final questions, I would love it if you can interpret what you've been building with the Lego and what nonsense I've built as well.
I love pathways. And so I do just like where do paths lead you? And so I actually had never seen these Lego things with these columns, but it just seemed like it actually reminded me of the pathway underneath the Hellgate Bridge up in the Bronx, where which is what I wrote the original proposal for the South Bronx Greenway, which actually connects the South Bronx, to Randall's Island and to the rest of the Greenway, actually literally from Maine to Miami. Mm-hmm. And that is one of my favorite parts of the city. So it's just like this would be the bridge underneath on top. And then this is the the way when you're looking to your left or to your right, you can see like other sides of the Bronx or Queens. And that's what it reminded me of. So was my
I love it. Pathway. Yeah. Well, now this puts my atrocity to shame. What do you think this is?
Oh, this is a pool.
A pool?
Yeah. I mean, isn't this the climbing? You climb up there and then that's
exactly it. That's exactly what I was doing. Yeah. Perfect. Couldn't have planned it better. A pool and the gateway. You have it here. We'll ignore this. Let's move into our final questions.
Okay.
What are some books, movies, role models that have strongly influenced your life?
Oh gosh, I don't know the name of it, but I just got Mel King's book. Mel King is an amazing community developer who just passed away in Boston, and actually, started this thing called Tent City, where it was just like they would started off as a protest of like not housing and supporting the Black community in Boston, and it grew into this whole amazing thing where it was just like more housing and different opportunities for folks within the community. So that's like, and he was a giant among men. So I'm reading his book right now. Jose Humphreys just wrote a book, and it's his new one. And he's actually a pastor up in East Harlem. And and I can't remember. It literally just came out, and I just bought it, and it just arrived. But now I can't remember the name of it. But it's his new book, and it's like ecosystems of hope, something like that. And it's all about it's about developing communities. Mm-hmm. And then what other book have I been wanting to read? I feel
and movies and role models.
Oh gosh. Wouldn't call them role models, although I do love Ali Wong. But that crazy show Beef, which is, oh gosh, it's just, I just think she's brilliant, and just but you see between her and the other protagonists, you just see how both of their lives are just in these horrible places, and they've And it reminds me of Community in a very strange way, because, she's really actually pretty wealthy, trying to sell her business. And he's this young, guy who's just like trying to like deal with like family issues, but also his own place in the world. And you think they're very different, but they're actually very similar, trying to find their way in the world. And I just think that the struggle is real for everybody. So I've been watching that a lot. I like that. And I can't say I like it because it's a horrible show, but it brings up all sorts of things that I just realized how like people just have a lot of stuff going on in their minds. And honestly, the movie that I just saw recently, and it's an old movie, but I'd never seen it, Akilah and the Bee. Did you ever hear that?
I've not.
Oh
no.
my gosh. So it's Kiki Palmer, who's like now big, she's grown up and everything.
Okay.
Her first big movie when she was like 11 years old, she played this little girl from South Central, Los Angeles, who turns out she was brilliant, but wanted to play dumb because, she was from South Central Los Angeles and people allegedly didn't value education. So she hid it. Turns out she was like this brilliant and what became a national spelling bee champ. And it was just like the story of her family and community, and like, people wanted her to win. And it was just like, I sat on the plane, I've watched it on the plane, just like sobbing and cheering, and loved that movie. So yeah.
Sounds amazing. That's a great list. In her poem, I Rise, Maya Angelou wrote the following verse: leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise.
Mm-hmm.
Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise.
Man.
Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave.
Mm-hmm.
I rise, I rise, I rise.
Amen.
In your recent TED Talk, you said that I'm the manifestation of my mommy and daddy's wildest dreams.
Yes.
If you could have one more conversation with them today, what would you say?
See? I did make you proud. Didn't become a doctor or a lawyer, but just what they were hoping. But I think they'd be really happy. I'm so grateful for all they've given me.
I agree. You did make them proud. And as your high school teacher, Miss Transport would say, it's time to take your flowers. Follow-up question. What would you like your legacy to be?
Oh gosh, I think I saw problems and I worked to fix them. Kind of simple, but really true.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's an adaptation of I came, I saw, I conquered. Yeah. I saw problems, I fixed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Or tried, like I gave it my best. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think you already have a very rich legacy that you will be leaving behind. Jimi Hendrix had once said that you have to give people something to dream on.
You've heard that too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. That's one of my favorite quotes like ever. It really is.
We started this interview talking about Bronx in the 70s, your childhood. We spoke about the past. We then moved to the present, spoke about your work and your projects. Let's talk about the future.
Mm-hmm.
What is your vision for Bronx, Hunts Point, 50 years from now?
Oh.
Talk us through what daily life in Bronx should look like. What do you dream? What do you see?
Oh, my dear. I really do think that it's going to be, a bunch, like just concretely, a bunch of people, that own and operate many of the businesses there. There's like a real major home ownership rate that was way bigger even than before the 2008 financial crisis. That folks really believe that there's hope and opportunity available right there for them to participate in. And it is just the hottest place. But that so many, but most of it locally owned and operated. That's what I feel that people even start thinking that it's like new black and brown Wall Streets up in there. That would make me really happy.
It's a beautiful vision. Yeah. Final question for you.
Uh-huh.
What do you think is the meaning of life, Majora Carter?
Oh, I think it is like the two biggest commandments that my faith gives me, which is, love God and love your neighbor. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the meaning of life. You do that, and if everybody did that, everybody would be okay. But we don't all do that.
You don't all do that. Love is always the answer.
It's true.
And you know that for sure.
I do.
Majora, thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, get involved, read your book, where can they do so?
Yes. So you can buy my book anywhere you buy books. Although I would suggest buying it from a local bookseller, wherever you are. Support local. And then, Majora Carter, it's Major with an A, Carter as in, Jimmy or Jay-Z, pretty much anywhere. And it's Boogie Down Grind, Instagram, and also Bronxlandia, also on Instagram. And come visit if you're anywhere nearby.
Come visit Majora. Majora, thank you so much. It was an honor talking to you.
Oh, thank you. You too. Oh my gosh, this was great.